right, and welcome back to another episode of Butler's Babble. It's great to start doing these on a regular basis again. I do apologize for coming in on a Wednesday night this time. I know we always say we're going to do the Tuesday nights, but since yesterday was Valentine's Day, I figured I'd let everybody, including myself, take the night off and switch it to another night. I think my wife would have been a little upset if I did cancel some Valentine's plans just to come on and do a podcast. So we moved it on to tonight, and I'm hoping we're going to get a lot of people coming on here. And remember, if you want to leave a comment or questions for our guest today, by all means, you can do that by just writing it in the comment section there. But if you can beforehand, if you have a chance, go to streamyard.com/Facebook and give them permission to use your name so that when the comments come up, we know who you are and I can actually put your comments up on the screen. But we have a great show for you today. And like I say all the time, I know I always tell you that, but I mean, today's guest, I think you're really going to find that this is somebody that had an atypical life, that's for sure. She went through a lot of stuff that a lot of people would not go through. I mean, some people get knocked down once or twice, and she's got knocked down a few times, but she's here to talk about it and to show you that no matter what, she's here to inspire you that you can get through it and you can go on. And as she said, and we'll get to that later, but she says move forward. So let's bring our guest out here instead of listening to me babble on, and let's bring Jill on. Jill, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, John. Thank you so much for having me today. I really
No,
appreciate the opportunity.
no, and I know between the two of us, we weren't sure if we were even going to do this tonight again because both of us are going through some big wind storms. I know here it's raining really good right now, and we had a lot of wind going on. My studio was shaking in the windows, and I know you were having some troubles there in southern Ontario.
Yeah, completely. I'm hiding in my basement right now, so I don't know what's going on outside. So
Well, if for any reason anybody that this podcast does get shut down because of weather, if a power goes out or something like that, Jill and I will find another time. We will redo it again, or if we have to, we will get together ourselves one day and just record an episode, the rest of the episode, and then we'll play it live for everybody back if we have to. We'll find a way to get her story out there. So, why don't we find out a little bit about you? Tell our audience a little bit about Jill, where you grew up, where you were born. Tell us a bit about your family life as a little youngster.
all right, let's see if I can kind of paint a picture of myself. Currently, I am 47 years old, and I have three amazing children. I have a son that's 20, just turned 22, and I have twin daughters that are 18.
Hmm.
And I was born in a small town in southern Ontario, and to two very young parents. I have an older sister. I was born in 1975, so I'm very blessed, I think, to be born in that generation.
I agree.
Even though I think emotionally I'm more of a 1940s soul, but you know what? I'll take 1975 because I think it was a pretty special time to be to experience. So
I
uh,
agree. I was a 72 baby, so I
yeah,
grew up in the same area as you. So,
yeah, no, it you can't beat it. So
no.
um, growing up, I was very lucky. I had very young grandparents. So my grandmother was actually 40 years old when I was born,
Mm.
which I didn't understand kind of how young she was until I got older. And I never understood when I was a kid. And she took me out in public and people would, refer to her as my mom. And I'd be like, it's not my mom, that's my grandma. But I was very lucky because I was, pretty much had a second set of parents and had extra love that way. And my dad had a very big family. My dad had eight brothers and sisters and an extremely close and amazing family that we did absolutely everything together. So I was very blessed in that way growing up, but I was also very sheltered that way as well because it was an amazing experience, but it also made me very naive to life
Okay.
and kind of thing. I kind of grew up on the perfect 1980s sitcom kind of thing.
Well, and you talked about how your grandparents were young and you didn't realize how young they were, but you got to remember back in those days too, people they graduated high school or sometimes even they dropped out of high school, they got married at young ages, had children very young in their late teens, early 20s. So I can understand where that would have came from.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like it was young generation each
Yep,
time, and which played into its advantage because it was great to have so much life and so much love
definitely.
and so much support as I grew up. So but yeah, but like I was saying, my dad had, I had an amazing childhood. I loved to be outside and I was very active. I was very stubborn. Uh, I think I'm told I'm still very stubborn, and I think maybe that's what's helped me survive. Um, but very, very stubborn as a child. I didn't like hot dogs, and the really odd things that kids didn't like. I have this really, hate for applesauce and different things like that.
Oh,
So,
really?
and a little fun fact I think about me too is I'm probably the only person on the planet that doesn't like hot chocolate. But, um, but yeah, but growing up, I had, great. I think my only goal in life, I think honestly, when I was young, that I can remember is that I wanted to have a family. I wanted to grow up. I wanted to. Um, just have kids and be a mom. And I got really interested in how, I was a good student. I had to work really, really hard. I didn't party, and which made me an ideal daughter, I think. But when you hear more of my story and kind of where my life went into, I think there's reasons why I didn't go out in high school, because there was something um, chemically wrong with my body, that kind of kept me at home and kept me safe. So, but I was a good student. I went to university for a nutrition degree, and um, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I finished university, and then I had met while I was in university. I had reconnected with somebody that I knew in high school, and we started to date. And then shortly after university, we got engaged, and then we planned to get married. And that's kind of where my story started to change, was right there.
Yeah. And going back to like high school, were you more of an athletic type of a person? Were you more the academic? Were you a bookworm?
I was a little bit of both. So, in grade 9, I did get the, athlete of the year award kind of
Mhm.
thing. But as I went to a very small high school, I had a very small town, so we didn't have really a lot of opportunities for athletics and stuff. So I played, your basic sports and stuff. And but yeah, no, I played the basketball. I hated volleyball, so I refused to play volleyball. But I
Mhm.
played all the other sports, and but I was a good mix of both.
Yes.
I had to be a bookworm to get my marks. I would actually go to school at about quarter to 7 in the morning and sit in the hallways and just read through the textbooks, because I knew I had to put that extra effort in to get the marks so that I could kind of go on with my life and achieve the academic stuff that I wanted to achieve.
Yeah. And you grew up down, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, forgive me, but you grew up in Southern Ontario, Canada here, just like I
Yeah.
did. I grew up in the Toronto, Brampton area, which is in Southern Ontario, and you're not too far from there. I don't think a few hours maybe.
Yeah, no, I grew up in Dunnville, so I grew up in
Okay.
Haldeman County.
Okay. And so, yeah, I was the same way. And we didn't have the snow days back then like they do now. I mean, it seems like almost every other day my 15-year-old's home for school because it's a snow day, even though the next day hasn't even started yet. And they're saying, oh, tomorrow's going to be a snow day.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I was the generation that they canceled the buses, and I was still forced to walk to school because the schools were open. So
Yes, exactly. And I lived around the corner from the schools all the time. And I think the
yeah,
furthest school I went was junior high, which was about a 15, 20-minute walk. So my parents still made me go to school. So
yeah,
I know I feel you there.
yeah.
So
No, that's me.
so we get out of university and things are going great and you and um, your other half there are doing well, and then like you said, that's where the story kind of begins.
Yes. So basically, what happened is, yeah, I graduated university. I got married a short period after that. Kind of, like anybody starting their life, I was so excited.
This
We
is
were
the
making
late
plans.
90s, early 2000s, I suppose.
Yeah, 1999 we got married.
Okay, sorry, I
Um,
didn't mean to interrupt you
nope,
there.
nope, that's okay. It was September of 1999 we got married. Unfortunately, my grandfather, a few weeks before our wedding, had passed away of cancer. So
Okay.
he was, one of my, parents, and I was absolutely devastated. So
Hmm.
that was my first loss,
Yes.
was a few weeks before my wedding, was losing my grandfather, and I was absolutely devastated by that. So we got married. We're making plans for our future, and um, making plans for a family already. I wanted to start a family already because it was something I wanted so desperately. And so, very short period went on, and in June of 2000, we found out, it was June 3rd of 2000. We found out, I did a home pregnancy test, and we found out that we were expecting our first child. And, I followed up the next week with blood tests at the doctor's office and all those things. And once 9 days after we got confirmation that, yes, I was pregnant, my husband was killed.
Wow.
And it was June 16th of 2000. And that's where the story changed.
Exactly. So it was like around the 1:30 in the morning mark is when that happened.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, he passed away. His official time of death was about 1:30 in the morning. So I didn't find out until um, I was home alone, and at about 6:30 in the morning, the doorbell rang, and I was asleep, and I jumped out of bed and I looked out our bedroom window, and our bedroom window looked down onto our driveway, and there was a police cruiser in my driveway, and I rushed downstairs, and as I rushed downstairs, I had a memory flashback of a friend who passed away. Actually, the anniversary of her death is coming up in the next few days, of hearing about her mother hearing the news of the
Hmm.
accident, and knowing if there was a police officer at my door, there was something very seriously wrong. And then I just remember I opened the front door and the police officer was standing there, and she didn't say anything. And all I remember is screaming at her, "Tell me what's wrong. Tell
Hmm.
me." And her grabbing me by the shoulders and taking me into the living room. And she didn't tell me what had happened until she had actually sat me down on the couch. Um, and then I just remember her telling me there was an incident and Derek passed away from the result of his injuries. And and my memory of that moment is then looking at her, and I said to her, "Well, what about the baby?"
Hmm.
And she said, "Well, what do you mean about what about the baby?" And I said, "Well, I'm pregnant." And we hadn't told our families yet. It was actually Derek passed away. It was Father's Day weekend. It was the Friday before Father's Day. And it was our plan that weekend to announce to our family that we were expecting. And instead, on Father's Day, I was at his funeral visitation.
Mm. Definitely, yes, not something that anybody should have to go through. That's for sure. Especially when you're expecting and just got married and life's just starting. Basically, it's a new chapter, basically.
Yes.
But on unbeknownst to you, it was a new chapter that was starting.
Yeah, it's like anything in life. You don't know when that chapter is going to change on you and what's out of your control, and this was out of my control, and I was being pointed in a new direction in life that I had no idea, that a road that I was going to have to travel.
Hmm. And like you said, it was just like a week before Father's Day. And if I'm not ever read correctly too, it was like that was when you guys were going to announce to everybody about your pregnancy too.
Yes, that's what we were planning on doing. We were planning on announcing on Father's Day that we were expecting.
So now take us through. Okay, that the funeral happens. Now what? Now what are you planning? Because I remember too, I was reading something about you were even offered a job at one time and things like that. That was your dream job, actually.
Yes, no, you were right. So I had the degree in nutrition, and ideally, I wanted to be a dietitian one day, but I had to get an internship, and I had applied for a job in Hamilton, in the food service part of the hospital, and I had gone for an interview the week before Derek passed away. And actually, the day he passed away, they had called and left a message saying I had gotten the job, and they were so gracious and so understanding. And that's one thing about my journey I've really tried to focus on, is I've had so many positive experience of people's compassion. Is the Hamilton Health Sciences gave me, I had a kind of like a get out of jail free card. Like, that job was open to me as long as much time as I felt I needed to come to that job. I was able to take it. They were going to hold a position for me.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was my opportunity. It was my door opening for my dream job, and I eventually decided the grief was too much, and I couldn't focus on my job and raising a son in the situation that I was in. So very short time after that, I actually turned the position down.
Mm, no. Um, so we move on now. During that time, of course, you're I guess a couple weeks pregnant at this time, or a couple months pregnant when this happened.
When Derek passed away, I was about 6 to 8 weeks pregnant.
Okay, so still fairly
Yeah,
new. So you're about a
very new.
month and a half in, basically.
Yes.
So I guess then you do tell everybody, of course, sometime after this that you're pregnant.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, the morning that I called my mom once I found out what had happened to Derek, and I remember she answered the phone, and I told her to, "Mom, sit down. I have to tell you something." And my words were, "Derek's dead, and I'm pregnant."
mm,
And then I knew I had to get to his parents' house as soon as possible because I knew I had to give them that little bit of light of hope,
mhm,
for them to know that I was expecting, that there was something, he was leaving something behind, and I knew they were really
exactly.
gonna need to hear that as soon as possible.
Definitely. So I'm Ghost. Everybody now is going to do their best to support you during this whole thing because you need that support. Because now not only are you pregnant and they're needing that normal um, nurturing support for having a baby, but you're also going to be grieving at the same time, and that could be a toll on the baby in the stomach too. I'm sure.
Yeah, no, completely. I had a lot of, um, like that day I had to go and I had to pick out a cemetery plot, and I was actually crawling on my hands and knees in the grass in the cemetery because my back pain was so bad. And they gave me, they gave me Ativan, and they told me the risk of the Ativan on the baby was less than the stress I was going through, and that I needed to take it if I needed to relax and to sleep at night because we couldn't risk that because I was so early in the pregnancy that I had a miscarriage or something from the
Hmm.
emotional stress.
Yeah, because I have heard of that happening. So we're glad that that didn't happen because come February 3rd, 2001, you get a nice, beautiful bundle of joy.
I did. I
And
did.
I loved reading it that it said on that date, two amazing eyes greeted this world. Just the way you worded it, and when you did, everything shone brighter. You said, and I'm sure the first thing you saw when you looked in there was your husband's. Your
Oh,
husband's.
completely. It was, I couldn't get luckier with my, pretty much with my pregnancy and the delivery. And I used to always, tell Jared that when he was a baby, I'd tell him stories about how his daddy up in heaven helped his mommy have him, um, and you're right, it was amazing to see that child and to know that he was okay. Because when you start to go through something traumatic, now I went through one very traumatic loss. There's that fear that something was going to happen to
Hmm.
him, and when he was born, he had his father's brightness and light and love and everything in his eyes, and it was just incredible to see.
And I think maybe that's what sort of, because I'm sure during that whole time between your husband's death and the birth of your son, that grieving period, people don't understand. Like, no matter how much you try, and no matter how much people are trying, I mean, people are trying to be nice, of course, and they're trying to say the right things, and you're still like, I'm sure you were thinking back about how am I going to do this by myself? How am I going to do this? Just everything that goes through, plus just the thought of not, this was a person you thought you're going to spend the rest of your life with, and I just think that at that moment, if I read it correctly, at that moment, that's when you realize, you know what, this little guy deserves to have somebody here that's gonna um, push forward and push through this, as opposed to somebody that's always going to be dwelling on this grief and that. It's not easy. I know it is. I think it says it here. Um, his life represents the love shared between his parents and a love that deserved to be celebrated and remembered and not forgotten. I think that was a very impactful line when I read that, because I think that summarizes a little bit about um, what's got to happen in order to go on.
No, exactly right. Like as soon as I lost my husband, I really went into trying to learn as much as I could about grief and learning about myself and trying to figure out a way. I tried going to counselors and stuff, and for me, that just didn't work. I needed to kind of, I learned I had to feel the pain to get through it. And people used to always say, I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know how you do this. And I don't know how you're surviving. And I would always look at them and say, I'm going to be fine. And they're like, well, what do you mean you're going to be fine? I'm like, well, I don't love myself enough to get through this, but I know I love my husband and I love my kid enough.
Hmm.
And I'm going to somehow find a way for them to figure out a way to move on and to move forward with
Because
this.
I'm sure your husband would have wanted that too. He doesn't want you to be down and sad. I mean, it is a sad time, and I know, and it's not the same, of course. But I remember when my father-in-law passed away back in 2013, my wife's husband, or my wife's dad, um, she like they were very close, and even she says to this day that um, when people say, "Oh, you're going to be fine," and you'll be able to get through it, no problem, and you'll move on, and they say, "You know what? It's not that you never get over it. You just learn to live through it,
Yeah,
and it's not you." What was the word she used? She said, "It's just different. It doesn't get better. It just is different."
different.
And I never really understood that until that kind of a mentality until it did happen to us. And it's true. It's never the same, and you're never going to get over it because that person's deep inside you. But at the same time, it's different, and you just got to learn to live in that different world.
No, completely. And I think once I realized, because like people always say you're gonna time heals and all those things. So I was expecting a linear kind of progression with my grief. And I
Mhm.
quickly learned that it's not linear. There's ups and downs, and you never walk away from it. And once I finally figured that out, that's when I really started to move forward with my life, because I knew, him existing in my life, part of him still be part of my life is the pain that I was going to carry with me always.
Yep.
And then I just learned how to deal with it. And I don't know if I like the word accept, but it's kind of, it's just there, and it travels with me all the time, and that's okay, because that was, having him in my life, and I've allowed myself to grow from it and become
Hmm.
a better person, and I think that would make him very proud. And because we had just gotten married and everything was so fresh and so exciting, I knew the excitement he had for our life, and I know he'd be so disappointed if I didn't have a good life.
Yeah.
And that's what he wanted to give me, and I knew I had to give it to myself then to give him what he wanted.
But I think it also allows you and your son both to celebrate your husband's life and what you guys had to create your son, as opposed to just thinking of dwelling on the negative part. Let's celebrate who the man was, and something that your son can now learn about his dad.
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly what my husband deserved, was to be celebrated, and I didn't have nearly enough time with him, but it is what it is, and I
Hmm.
had to make the most out of it.
And then of course you start moving on with your life a little bit, and other little bundles of joy end up happening.
Yes,
I don't know
another
how else to say it. So
yes, another unique experience I've been through that not many people on the planet get the joy of experiencing is I then got pregnant with twins in my second marriage. So I got to experience that, which was and again, having my daughters is just, another something very positive that came from something very tragic.
hmm.
And I've always been very open with that with them, that they know that they are something very positive in my life from something that was very sad, that really has helped me grow as a person.
Exactly. And are they very close with your son too?
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They are all like
Is he the protective older brother?
oh yes.
Although as twins, I'm sure they did a lot of fun ganging up on him and
Oh yeah.
playing tricks on him and that.
Well, and their brothers had to be very patient, because it is a unique experience when you have twins in your own public, and it's always about the twins. And so yeah, it's been a unique ride, that's for sure.
Are they identical or
They're supposed to be fraternal, but they look identical.
okay?
But I've been told they're fraternal. I was told they
Yeah.
were fraternal when they were born. So
Are they able to pass off as one another?
they probably could, but they've never done it.
That
They
you
I'm
know
sure
of.
they could. Well, you know what? I don't think they have. I really don't think they have. So
See, here I am causing trouble in the family already. Look at that. And I've never even met them. They're gonna be like, "Shh, don't tell her that."
don't tell her we have done it. Yeah.
So that was around what 2004 they were born.
Yes, the girls were born in 2004.
Okay, and then of course we think, okay, this is the whole story, and everything's living now all better in that. But then of course 6 months or so after that, something else happens.
Yeah, so you know what? I worked so hard to get, my life back, and to have a life, to have a life of what I wanted. And my daughters were 6 months old. My dad had a rare autoimmune disease, Addison's disease. So what that is so if you kind of compare it to diabetes, instead of his immune system attacking his pancreas, it actually attacked his adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys. So he needed cortisol replacement and couldn't maintain his electrolytes properly. So it's a very rare and very life threatening condition that can lead to an adrenal crisis. So I grew up with this all my life. My dad was diagnosed before I was born, and for the most part, he maintained, the illness very, very well. He didn't have a lot of adrenal crisis or hospital stays or anything like that. So we were very kind of naive to his condition. And that Christmas, just before Christmas of 2004, after my daughters were born, he had to have an emergency open heart surgery. So he had a triple bypass and he had some issues post op that led to an adrenal crisis. And 2 weeks after, it was January 5th. So it was about 2 weeks after, I think, after he had the actual surgery, we had to take him off of life support because the adrenal crisis was so damaging to his body. It shut down organs, his kidneys, his liver, and then eventually they did an MRI on his brain and found out that he was actually brain dead, and we had to take him off of life support. So my dad was only 56. So in a very short period of time, I lost a grandfather that was like a father to me. I got married, I got pregnant, I lost my husband, and then I got remarried. I had twins, and then my father passed away all in 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but part of my dad's story, which is really important because he had Addison's disease, before we took him off of life support, it opened up a lot of conversations that between my mom and my sister. And I started to talk about the way I was feeling, and we've kind of discovered that I was having some symptoms of Addison's disease. And we just kind of stored that in the back of our memory bank. And things that I didn't realize were going on with my body physically were actually a reflection of my body attacking its adrenal glands.
Mm, okay. Yeah, and it's something that when you and I talked a few weeks ago, when we were talking about doing the show, like when you were explaining to me, I'd heard of the word Addison's disease, but I knew nothing about it. So it wasn't until you and I talked a bit about it, and then I read some of your stuff and went on your website and was able to read about it. And because it sounds to me like it's something that even in the medical field, they still don't know lots about it. It's something I guess fairly new, or not new. Like I guess it's been happening all the time, but it's something that they have sort of you hear about people doing stuff about cancer societies all the time and for heart and lung and stroke and things like that, but you don't hear many things going on about Addison's disease. It's almost like it's a new thing out there, even though it's been around for a long time.
It is extremely rare. It's becoming a little bit secondary adrenal insufficiency, which is so I primary. It's my immune system that attacked my adrenal glands. Some people get secondary, and that's if they've had to have their adrenal glands removed from cancer or something like that. But it's very something it's not talked about, and in the medical field, there's not a lot of knowledge um, about even how to treat it. So often, if I you go to an ER with adrenal insufficiency, they don't know the urgency behind it. There's
Mm-hmm.
not the education there for it, and it needs to be there because it's life threatening, um, and it can be easily corrected. An adrenal crisis can easily be corrected with steroids, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just a matter of getting them in time.
So during this time, he's passed away now. Like you said, in 6 years, this has all happened in that span. So you're just trying to keep your life going. You're just trying to say, okay, what's going to happen now? Because I know with my wife, her mom passed away at a young age. I think my wife was in her 20s when she passed away, and her mom was in her 40s, I think, when she passed away. And I can't remember. My wife would be better at this. I think it was like 43 or 49 or something like that when she passed away. And my wife has always said that she thinks she takes after her mom because my wife's got health issues sometimes too, because she's had strokes and that. And she always says she's always had it in her brain that she's gonna be the same as her mom, and she's gonna pass away early too. And so I always tell her, you can't go by that. You got to live your own life, and you never know what's going to happen to you. And she's like, well, if I make it past the same age she was when she passed away, then I'll believe that. So that's in the back of her mind all the time. So, but you're going on, you're trying to get your life. Now, this, of course, is a nice big hit to the gut again. And, but for somehow you're able to start working on it and you're going back. And this is, I think, somewhere in the next couple of years, I guess after that, you start going in and going to school again or something to get your, is it your personal training and your
Yes.
yoga?
Yep. So part of when my dad passed away, something I learned from when Derek passed away is I tried to find something positive from it and kind of make a difference because of it. So so now I've lost my dad, and I had put the nutrition and everything that that dream job that I walked away from when Derek passed away. Um, when my dad passed away, and because he had a triple bypass, I still had this interest in nutrition. I wanted to help people. I had this drive for wellness and well-being. I did my best to take care of my own body. And so when my dad passed away, I actually when he was actually in the hospital and we didn't know what was going on, I got this in my head. I was going to save the world. I didn't want anybody's dad. I always called my dad my Indiana Jones. We
Mm-hmm.
used to lay on the couch when I was a kid and we'd watch Temple of Doom over and over again. And I would get so I it's probably the only kid that got excited when she had the flu and got to stay home, because I knew if I had the flu, that meant laying on the couch with daddy and watching Temple of Doom. So, uh, so he was my Indiana Jones, and I wanted to save everybody's Indy. And so when he was in the hospital, I had actually ordered in my personal training manual and started to read it while we were taking care of him. And it became my mission to get back into nutrition and to become a personal trainer. And we converted our basement into a little personal training studio. And I started to put the two things together to help people as much as I can. And then eventually, it led into becoming a yoga instructor as well.
And it looks like behind you there, that's the little studio you're talking about. I can see fitness things in
Yes,
the back
yes.
there. Maybe I should come see you because I have to get myself back into. I always say that I have the dad bod, as they say,
Oh,
the
yeah.
classical dad bod.
That's
Although
okay, that's
I
okay.
change it. And I don't call it a dad bod. I tell everybody it's called a father figure. It's not a
There
dad
oh, there
bod.
you
It's a
go. Yeah,
father figure.
yeah.
And the people wonder with my hair, and then it's like, well, this is not from anything else. This is just from being married with two daughters. That's
Yeah.
why I have no hair. And when it does grow, it's gray. But my wife will say I was going bald before then. But so now you get your personal training, you get your yoga, and I guess you start doing it out of your basement there, and things are going good. And we think, okay, she's back on track now. Things are going to be fine from now on. But that couldn't have been any further from the truth.
No, it couldn't have
I
been
shouldn't be
further.
laughing, but it's just
So,
now that we look back at it.
you know what? I've had so many experiences, and I'm now that I'm 47 and I'm looking back on my life, like I even do it. Like, and I understand now when I used to meet people over the years and they'd be like, "Oh, tell me about yourself." And then we just be having, a natural conversation like this, and things would be come up, and I'd be like, "Oh, well, this happened and this happened." And then they'll be looking at me like, "Are you serious? Like, what
Exactly.
what?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's just my life. Like, it's
Yeah.
just kind of, it was the next door that kind of slammed in my face." So,
Yeah, exactly.
but yeah, life went on. I had these three little kids, and I was going through some things in the next 6 years where, I just kind of, I was in my early 30s. I was kind of racking it up to, I've had a lot on my plate in life. I've had grief. I've lost my dad. Um, I have three little kids. I'm a mom. I was, depressed. I was tired. I was extremely lean, and we just kind of racked it always up to life
Hmm.
and kind of ignored everything. And then eventually, um, as time progressed, I started to realize some other things were going on in my body, and a lot of red flags started to happen. And actually, after my dad passed away, because I said we had that conversation about some symptoms I was having, I was actually tested for Addison's disease. And at that moment, everything looked okay. And, but yeah, time kind of progressed, and I was tired all the time. I was having a lot of symptoms that I knew that were related to somebody with Addison's disease. So I headed to my family doctor to see if I could get some answers on that.
Yes. And you talk to the doctor and
So basically, I went into the doctor and I went in and I had my list of symptoms, and he didn't really know me that well at that point.
hmm
And the biggest symptom I had was there's two very major symptoms with Addison's disease, and one is very high salt cravings
hmm
because you don't retain sodium anymore. So I would actually get so stressed I'd actually have to put salt in my hand and lick it to feel better,
Okay.
so that I would have a surge of sodium. And then hyperpigmentation is a huge, so my skin was actually darkening. it was January, and everywhere I went, people were telling me how beautiful my tan was. Where have you been? And I'm like, I think I'm dying. It's the tan that you get from this disease I might have. So basically, what happens, there's a hormone from the brain that stimulates the adrenal glands. And when the adrenal glands start to die, you need super high amounts of this hormone for the adrenal glands to work so that you don't die and your body keeps functioning. So this hormone had skyrocketed in my body. But what happens when this hormone goes super high, it actually binds to the cells in your skin that make you tan.
Mm,
So it went into those cells, and I actually had a beautiful tan. So that was the key symptom that my doctor recognized, was the hyperpigmentation, and that I was going into adrenal failure. We followed it up with an endocrinologist and some further testing, and I was very lucky because a lot of people with chronic illnesses, and on this road, it takes years sometimes to get answers and to get people to listen to you. I had a family doctor that listened to me. I got into an endocrinologist quickly and had the testing done, and within about 4 weeks, it was confirmed, and I was on medication to treat my Addison's disease diagnosis.
okay. The one thing that kind of shook me up, and it goes back to when I was saying like how I find it's very new with with the medical community, and I don't mean new as in it's a new disease, but just the way that it's out in the open is just the way the original doctor, I guess, when you went to see them, the way he treated you. Because I think you were saying that he basically just shook it off and just said that, oh, well, you have Addison's disease. You're going to be fine. Here's your meds. Don't forget to take them and come see me in 6 months. Like
Yes,
as if it was just nothing, like you just had a cold type of thing.
yeah, that was the endocrinologist that diagnosed me. He pretty much pushed me out the door, and that's what we're faced with, is
Yeah.
even endocrinologists, the specialists that are supposed to have the most knowledge about our illness, really, for the most part, have no knowledge. And I was very shocked with, the history and the knowledge I already had about Addison's disease, that's how I was treated. Our quality of life is not, diabetics have ways to test their blood sugar. I need to be able to test my cortisol levels in my blood so that I can adjust my medication. And we don't have that. We have to go on physical
Mm,
symptoms. So as soon as I start to experience physical symptoms of low cortisol, my body's already starting to go into some type of crisis or shutdown
okay.
mode. So it's very frustrating not to have that support. But
Yeah.
I was lucky. I have a very extremely smart family doctor who's extremely smart, extremely caring. He actually did his degree in South Africa. And in South Africa, they actually have a higher instance of people with Addison's disease. So he actually studied it more. So he's been my main source of helping me focus on improving my quality of life and keeping me alive.
So you're going to be, of course, this will be with you for the rest of your life. There's no cure for it.
Yeah.
But and like you said, there's no way of testing it. So are they working on that? Is there a way that they're trying to find out? Is there different tests that are being run on people? Is there like I don't know, there's got to be some way that they can try and regulate a little bit with medication and that a little bit easier.
You know what? So right now, actually, a little quick fun fact is JFK had Addison's disease.
Okay.
So that the color, the darkness of his skin,
Hmm.
is why he was so tanned. So he's one of the most famous people with adrenal insufficiency. But there's very limited research going on in Addison's disease right now. So in an emergency situation, I need an extremely high dose of hydrocortisone to save
Okay.
my life. So if I'm ever in a car accident, I break a bone, I've gone into adrenal crisis just out of pure physical exhaustion before. We need a device like an EpiPen so that
Yeah.
we can easily administer it. We don't have that. We have to, shake a vial. We need to fill a syringe, and then we need to like darted into our bodies to get the medication into
Okay.
us. We need a way to measure our cortisol levels. We don't have that. One technology that I'm working really hard at getting the information and the education out there is an endocrinologist in the United Kingdom. Actually, I'll show you quickly. Um, I actually use, so this is a diabetic infusion pump. So instead of
Okay.
insulin, we actually put hydrocortisone in it, and it
Okay.
does its best to mimic what a natural adrenal glands would do. And and this was, I've been on this for 6 years, and this has been life changing for me. It's completely changed my quality of life.
So if your body or that if that device sort of determines that you're low on cortisol, it'll inject some into you, and is it instant or
No, this doesn't. So this basically, we've programmed it kind of like a diabetic would for their insulin, trying to figure out how their insulin would need for the day. We've
okay?
kind of tried to program the hydrocortisone doses I need throughout the day to mimic a normal human being with functioning adrenal glands. And then, but I still need to give myself extra medication if I feel the
Okay.
low cortisol. So it doesn't detect anything. It just gives the pattern of cortisol that I want throughout the day.
Oh, I see. Okay. So it's just sort of like it's almost like on a timer type of thing. At
Yeah.
certain times of the day, it automatically just puts it into your system.
It's actually a 24-hour continuous supply.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is absolutely amazing.
And how is it powered? Just like with a sort of rechargeable battery you just plug in, or
Yeah, it's just got, so there's actually, you can see the little wire, so that's
yeah.
actually wired into my stomach,
Okay.
and then I just program this like a diabetic with their insulin, and
Yeah.
it just slowly pumps through the wire and goes into my body.
Well, at least they're starting. At least that's.
Amazing.
I think that is amazing. I mean,
It
I
is.
love. I'm a
It's
gadget guy. I
amazing.
love technology, and that.
Yeah.
You ask my wife, I'm always buying different gadgets for around here. So,
Yeah. No, so
um,
it's an insulin pump for diabetics, but we just put different medication in it, and away I go.
so moving on after now you've got diagnosed and now you're going through everything. Now I'm sure you're back into grief again. Now, what's going on with your kids at this time? Because they're still fairly young when you're going through all this. Because this is all happening in a span of 13 years, if I calculated correctly, from
Yeah,
about
no.
age 23 to 35, I think it was.
Yes, I was diagnosed at 35. For my kids, I think I've always been very open about life. I think,
Hmm.
as a child, I was very sheltered. I was that 1975 generation where I think nobody really talked about anything too much. At least my parents didn't. It was kind of, we were the kids outside playing, come back when the street lights come on, and you kind of passed in the night with everybody. So there wasn't a lot of communication about kind of life and the things that you deal with in life. So I was always very open with my children
Hmm.
about my grief and how I felt and my different ups and downs in life, because I wanted them to understand me, and I wanted to
Yeah.
give them the tools in life to deal with the things that they were going to be confronted one day. So when I was diagnosed, I was very upfront with them with what mom was dealing with,
Hmm.
and they just kind of always seemed to take it with,
Well, it's just kind of normal for them because that's all they've ever known, really.
yeah, it was just normal. It was kind of, you know what, here it is. This is the way it works. This is what we're going to deal with. We're going to deal with it. We're going to hold our heads high, and we're going to move forward, and we just got to figure this out.
Yes.
And that was kind of, the attitude and the role model I wanted to be for them, and I knew it was going to help me with my quality of life, and help them deal with, because I don't know what they're experiencing, knowing that, you know their mother has just been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness that they know took their grandfather as well.
Exactly. That's the way I was looking at it too. And that's why I wanted to bring the children up because in a situation like that, when they are young, I mean, it's already you're going through so much mental health yourself because, I mean, rightfully so with everything you've been through. And like you said, we grew up in that generation where mental health was not a big thing you talked about. If you even came close to, they didn't even have that term mental health back then. If
Yeah.
you came close to anything what we call people having some mental health issues these days, you would have been put away or told that you have to go see a psychiatrist or you got to. It's totally different now. Now it's a lot more open. I mean, we still have ways to go, of course. Don't get me wrong, but we still have nowadays where it is more open that you can talk about things like this, and it does affect the children, I'm sure, in a family too, because their mental health, they're trying to go to school and peer pressure is hard enough, and going to school and then having your mom going through this, and they're probably growing up going to school with in a single parent family. I mean, that's hard enough. So it seems like together all of you have been able to help you, each one of you is through this in a way to keep that mental health at a as low as possible and help each other get through this whole ordeal.
Yeah, like I said, like that's one thing I wanted, the communication with my kids, and I would always say to them, and even with my son, like, I would ask him things if I found something of his dad's, and I'd be like, either do you want me to keep it, or is it time for mom to let it go? And I'd always follow it up like, I don't know what it feels like to be you. and how you are in this situation. And just when I lost Derek, I learned to trust my heart, and I wanted
Mhm.
to put that into my kids. You trust your heart, whatever decision you make in that moment, just make the best decision you can for yourself, and we accept that.
Exactly. Now, have they ever questioned? I don't know. Is now when it comes to Addison's disease, your dad had it, then you had it. So it sounds like it's possible that it could be hereditary. Are they worried that they might have it too, all three of them? Because
Well, it's not supposed to be hereditary, but apparently in my family it is because my dad had it, I have it. My mom actually has a first cousin that has it, and my dad has a cousin that has it.
mm.
So it's only supposed to be like 1 to 10 in a million, and apparently that 1 to 10 is in my entire family. So so, um, I was told initially my children shouldn't be at risk because it's a rare illness, but one of my daughters is definitely showing signs of what I can look back as early as high school and can see the ups and downs of different things that I was going through. Like I mentioned in high school, I didn't like going out to parties. It was too
Mhm.
stimulating. It was too exhausting. There was something that told me, stay home and go to bed. You needed your
Yeah.
rest. And I can see that with one of my daughters as well. We can see when she's overstressed, she needs days of recovery. And we've tested her, but it's so hard to catch it in the early stages because the body truly is amazing. And her adrenal glands, if there's an issue, can fight very hard and mask that there's something
Mhm.
devastating going on in her body right now.
Did your dad find out about his Addison's disease when he was younger, or was it later in life, like yourself?
My dad found out before I was born, so I think he was about 22. So often
Okay.
with Addison's disease, because the body can compensate for so long, if you hit a stressful event, it can kind of trigger an adrenal crisis. So you
Okay.
can't deal with that event. Your adrenal glands can't produce the cortisol, and he was diagnosed. He had actually been shot by a shotgun by a friend in the leg,
Hmm.
and so he had that traumatic event. And then I think once that occurred, he got progressively very, very skinny and lean and very weak,
Mhm.
and they actually thought he had a problem with an ulcer. Is a story I was told. He was put in the hospital. He was 22, and my mom called the hospital to check on her husband, and the nurse told her that he's probably going to die, and she'll be lucky if he makes it through the night.
Okay. I think what amazes me is you've gone through all this stuff, and your children are going through it. Your dad's gone through, like everybody, your whole family's had to go through all this. Because I'm sure even your sister, I mean, it's got to be a toll on that part of the family too, because she's seeing her dad pass away from it. Now her sister has. I don't know if she's been diagnosed, but maybe not. Like you said, it's not hereditary, supposed to be anyways. But I think there's two things here that I read on your thing here that I highlighted that I thought was very impactful in a way that sums up what you've been through a little bit. Is one says that those experiences on life taught me invaluable lessons. I think that's a very invaluable thing to say because it is true. You learn, I think, through crisis what you can,
Yeah.
what your body, how much you can be pushed. When my wife had her last stroke, we had a 2-month-old baby and a 6-year-old daughter, and I had to raise them doing 12-hour shift work at a factory while my wife was in the hospital for 4 months straight, not knowing if she was going to survive. And I was going on 3 hours sleep, and I didn't learn how strong I was until you go through something like that. And so I think that saying that experience on life taught you invaluable lessons. I think it's very true. Not just strength that you can do, but the strength, resilience of your children, and just how you yourself can get yourself through all this and still be where you are today. I think it's amazing. And also the one thing was my wounds were not my fault, but healing was my responsibility. And I
Yes.
think that kind of sums where you are today because of that line right there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, um, yeah, like I just wanted to, you don't know how strong you're going to be, and the story is the story. So I
Exactly.
just wanted to move forward, and I had to find that strength. And it was always the little things, the meaningful things that people did that meant the most. And I carried that with me always and tried to give back. And one of the hardest things I found to kind of accept and come to realization to was when something absolutely horrible and catastrophic happens in your life, beautiful things can come from it.
Hmm.
And I've had so many beautiful and amazing things come from one moment that ended a life, changed my world, and but there's so many things that I wouldn't give up
Yep.
now because they've been beautiful gifts that I've been given. And I
Yep.
think when we can open up our eyes to that, um, it really changes your world, and you can move forward from your
Yeah.
grief.
Because your life goes on to a different path, and certain positive things that's come through your life you might not have had or met these people. Same with your daughters, and like it's a weird way to say it, but you might not have had those two girls if the first thing didn't happen,
Yeah,
because you would have
exactly.
been, because maybe you and your husband would have had another son or another boy or no kids at all. You never know, like things, path takes you. And I always say I'm not a very religious person, but I do believe in God and stuff like that, and I do believe that sometimes things happen for a reason, and maybe we are being tested sometimes to see how strong we are. And I think it just shows your resilience and your strength that you've gone through. And actually, my a friend of mine here, Terry Lynn, who's watching us right now, she had written that. I don't know if you can see it on there, but it says, "I applaud your strength and
Oh, well,
tenacity,"
thank you.
is what she said, because it takes a lot to get through that 13 years that you went through is probably 50 years for somebody else, all wrapped up in 13 years. Like you've aged that much. And I don't mean physically, but just emotionally and mentally, you've
Yeah.
aged so much, and you've came through on the other side. And by doing so, I know we don't have much time left. We have about 10 minutes or so. It brings me to like what you're doing now. And I looking at this thing, Team Addison Canada, which I think was, I don't know if that was an actual group or just a saying that you say that
Yeah.
leads to your business and stuff. But I saw that Team Addison Canada. I'm like, we got to talk about that.
Yeah, so basically what happened once I was diagnosed with Addison's disease, and like I said, like with my dad, we were naive to kind of the seriousness of his condition. I
Mhm.
really became a strong advocate because I didn't want to die of a crisis. So I wanted everybody within yelling distance of my life to know how to treat me if something is wrong and the urgency of it. And so I really started to be active on Facebook, sharing my story, and I had a really great response to that. And it was so great that I was actually contacted in the spring by a man from Sweden that runs Team Addison's Global and Team Addison Sweden, and he asked me to start the Team Addison Canada division of a nonprofit to advocate and educate for people with Addison's disease. So I've done that. I've kind of rolled that into my business, Chronically Fit Canada, as well. I'm trying to support people with, um, chronic illnesses because I have the degree in nutrition and fitness, and just trying to share my life experience on the mental side to help people as much as I can, and giving them kind of a guided experience, because problem with a lot of people with chronic illness is when we go for help to improve our wellness and exercise and stuff like that, sometimes it's really really hard to take advice from somebody who doesn't get it. And I've
Mhm.
had a great response from people saying, you know what, I like doing your workouts and I like the information you give because I know you get it. You know in your heart what those bad days and how hopeless you feel on those days, and we need to come together and kind of build a community and kind of keep pulling us through. So Team Addison's Canada is all about that awareness that needs to get out there, to help people living with adrenal insufficiency. And I've reached people in Australia and Brazil and Ireland. It's been an absolutely incredible journey, and again, it's something else. I learned so many lessons when I lost my husband that I had to use to push forward and to move on. And then I used them with my dad. I used them, with my illness. And now here I am doing something that, one of my Facebook posts had 50,000 shares on Facebook. Like it was, it's just incredible to see that positive ripple effect in life when you
Definitely.
finally fight and you finally get there.
No, definitely, and I can totally agree with that. I've always been the advocate. From another photographer friend of mine told me, when you're going to learn from something, why not learn from somebody who's successful? If you want to be successful, learn from somebody who is successful. And for if you want to learn more about Addison's disease and how to get through it, and if you're going through that, why not go and learn from somebody who's been through it, not once but twice now,
Yeah.
in two different ways. You've went through it as a spectator and what it's done, and now you're going through it as the participant. And so, who better to learn from than you? And I think it's amazing what you're doing, which brings us, of course, over to your website here, chronicallyfitcanada.com. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that too?
So basically, Chronically Fit Canada started when I was first diagnosed, because when I was diagnosed, it started as an apparel company, and I thought, you know what, when I have a bad day, everybody deserves a nice cozy hoodie to crawl in bed with. So I made a warrior hoodie that said Chronically Fit Canada on it and printed those off, and they were really popular locally, because not only because they were cozy and warm, just the message behind it to remind us that when we're a warrior, we got to keep fighting whatever we're going through, whether it's an illness, grief, just typical life struggles. You just got to push through, and you got to find your way. And then I just kind of left the business kind of on the back burner for a while. In the last few years, it's kind of evolved into, with COVID and everything and my lifestyle that has changed, an online community of bringing people together to work on their nutrition and their fitness and their mental health together so that they can improve their quality of life. My motto is progress, not perfection, because especially when you have an illness, you know, normal humans aren't perfect, and I can tell you when you have a chronic illness, life is never close to perfect, and you got to focus on progress. And
Definitely.
I really try to put out there how much me taking care of the things that I can control in my life, which is my nutrition, moving just as much as I can, whatever that looks like, and especially taking care of my mental health, how much that has improved my management of my illness. And if I can manage my illness, I have better quality of life. And that's kind of my passion right now, is just to help people to take those steps forward.
Exactly. And if they want to learn more about you and what you're going through and everything else, you have your podcast, the Pickle Jar Podcast. I love the
Yes.
title of it.
Yes, thank you. It's called the pickle jar because I don't retain sodium. So people with Addison's disease, we eat a lot of salt. We eat a lot of pickles. We drink pickle juice, and every pickle in the jar represents one of my fellow pickles that have a chronic illness. We're all in that jar together, trying to have the best life that we can.
Definitely. And I'm going to go listen to a bunch of those myself because I just haven't had a chance in the last week or so. I was hoping to before this podcast. I didn't get a chance to. So I'm going to go, and I'm definitely going to go and order some of your apparel when I get a chance. I was looking at the
Thank
different
you.
color. I got to wait till, of course, till they go back on sale again.
Yes, we do them
Um,
about 3-4 times a year. So
Yeah, I'm the same way. I have another thing I do with my high school, and we have a clothing line with our high school, and it's the company I use. We do it 3 times a year, so like every season or so, and because it's all custom made, that's probably why
yes,
you do yours.
yeah,
So it's
exactly.
order made by order, I guess, or made upon order type of thing. So I'm looking at those blue ones there, or even the teal ones, since if you look behind me, our colors are teal here.
Oh,
So I might have to look at a teal one there, but and then I'll take a picture, and you can post pictures of me on there. No,
okay.
not if you want people to buy them. You don't want to post
Yeah.
my picture on there. But no, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I mean, with anybody that's gone through what you've gone through, um, there's so many people that I know would have just thrown in the towel a long time ago. And I'm glad you didn't. That's what this whole podcast is about. And that's funny because I look at all the paperwork you had sent me originally to learn more about you and going to your website. And everywhere I go, you and I seem to have the same ideas. I mean, I see everywhere on your podcast, or I mean, on your website, the words empower. I see inspire. I see that on your written work. And one theme that I know, I think we can end, I think, with a that I'm noticing throughout this whole process from the time you're 23 to now, I think one theme that I get from listening to your story is, in quotes, I'll put it as to move forward, not move on. And I think that's a very provocative statement.
Mhm.
And I don't know if people understand what that means, but I think it's very true about how it's to move forward and not move on. Because I'm sure you had a lot of people saying, oh, you're going to be fine. You just got to learn to move on. You got to
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah, and I
And
think for me, psychologically, the words "move on" meant that I was leaving everything behind me, and
yeah,
I knew it wasn't.
forgetting things.
I was forgetting things, and once I knew, no, I was moving forward, and I was just carrying it with me, and it was just gonna be different.
Is there anything that you would like to say to everybody listening here before we leave? Just a final statement, final words from yourself?
You know what? If I could just end with, probably the biggest thing that I've learned in the last 23 years of my journey is the biggest tool that I have is to love myself. And when I finally figured out, um, I need to start loving myself unconditionally every day and just be in the moment and trust my instincts. And that's truly what I think has taken me through the last 23 years. And I'm just acknowledging that now, that it was self love and that mindset of just being in the moment and trying to get my ego out of it and trying not to listen to the outside world and just trusting myself. So um, I think that's the biggest gift that I've received from an unbelievable loss is
Hmm.
self-love, and that truly is priceless. Um,
Exactly.
and I hope I can give that to my children as well. So,
Well,
but I
I
really,
always say people aren't going to love you if you don't love yourself.
exactly, exactly. And I really appreciate this opportunity to share my unique story, which I can now acknowledge is unique, with everyone. So I really
Hmm.
appreciate your time and being here today.
I appreciate you coming on here because I knew that this story is something that people need to hear because so many people, like when I first started this journey of this podcast, my whole thing was not just to empower, inspire, motivate people, but to show people that no matter what you're going through in life, no matter where you are in life, there's always somebody out there that's either been through it or going through it or might go through it in the future. And to get these stories out there to show people that it's not bad to talk about it and to get it out there and let everybody learn from it. We can all be better people from it. And I have so much empathy for people, and I learned so much from every podcast. I was so honored when you reached out to me and saying that you thought you had a story that would be great for the podcast. And as soon as I met you, it's like, there's no way we can't have you on here. So I appreciate you taking the time to come out here and talk to everybody. And I hope that in the future, I'm going to probably put together maybe a little episode one time in the future where I'm going to get some past guests to come on and just share what they're up to and get some updates on everybody maybe and do a whole big hour long of a bunch of different guests on there. I hope you'd be willing to come back and share
Oh,
your
of
story
course,
with us then and
of course.
let us know how amazing you and your family are doing then. You can tell us about all your kids getting married and having kids of their own and
That makes me nervous. Okay.
but thank you for coming,
Thanks. Thank you.
and I really appreciate it. And for anybody else out there that's watching, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I surely did. And we're going to come back again, hopefully next month, with another amazing episode with another guests. And if you want to learn more about Jill and her story, go to Chronically Fit Canada.com. Go check it out. Check her podcast out, the Pickle Jar Podcast. I'm sure you're totally going to enjoy it and order some of her merch. Let's get some of that merch out there. So until next time, I hope everybody has an amazing day. And remember, if anybody asks, say the Butler did it.